So let's recall the equation that we use for the line is y is equal to mx plus b. We've said that the m represents slope. In other words, we've also called it the rate of change. We've also called it the variation constant. B represents the y-intercept, or in other words, where the line crosses the y-axis. And the other thing that you'll notice is that we have an x, and the x doesn't have an exponent. Well, it does. It's an invisible 1. The fact that x has an exponent of 1 means that we're going to always have a line. So let's say that we were given the slope and the y-intercept, and we were asked to give the equation of the line. So notice the m and the b, these are both numbers, so we can substitute the numbers in. So if I have m is equal to 3/4 and b is equal to -2, we're going to be inserting that into our equation. So y is equal to mx plus b. We know that the slope is 3/4, so we have y is equal to 3/4 x, and we're going to be adding a -2. Now, let's simplify. We have y is equal to 3/4 x minus 2. Let's do another one. We have a slope of -3 and b is equal to 0. We're going to substitute that into our equation. Y is equal to -3x plus 0. Now, for us to say plus 0, that's redundant. Because if I'm adding 0, really I'm adding nothing. I could just ignore that. So our equation y is equal to -3x. Now let's talk a bit more about the y-intercept. In this chart, I've got a whole bunch of dots that are y-intercepts of different lines. I took away the lines, just left all the places where it passes the the y-axis. Identify the coordinates of the y-axis and observe what you notice about the x-coordinate of each of the y-intercepts. So our first one, we have 0 and 6. We have 0 and 3.5 here. This one is going to be 0 and 2. Negative 0 and -1. This point is 0 and -3. Finally, we have 0 and -4. Now, what do you notice about the x-coordinate of each of the y-intercepts? You probably notice that the x-coordinate of each one is equal to 0. So for all y-intercepts, the x-coordinate is 0. And because it's 0, we can just use one number to represent the y-intercept. We know that x is always 0 because the y-axis is at 0, x. So we can use just the y-coordinate to represent the y-intercept. And that's why we have b is equal to the number. Okay, a few more examples. Let's identify the slope and the y-intercept. So just a reminder, y is equal to mx plus b. This is our original equation. M is the slope. M is always attached to the x. So M is the coefficient of x. So in this case, y is equal to 12 plus 9x. We have M is equal to 9. We know that it has to be 9 because M is the coefficient of x. B is equal to 12 because b is the constant that's added or subtracted to the term that has the x. Okay, second one, y is equal to x minus 1. M is equal to 1, and I'm going to put a little note here. It's equal to 1 because we don't have a coefficient. And when we don't have a coefficient, we have an imaginary 1 there. So like I said, in class, one is often redundant, and that's why we don't say it. Like if I'm in the classroom, you can say Miss Fan is in the classroom. You wouldn't necessarily give it a number and say one Miss Fan is in the classroom because there just is one. And this is the same thing here. If I just have one, I leave it um, without a number, and the assumption is that it's one. Okay, B is the number that's added or subtracted, and so we have -1. Okay, write the equation given the following information. So in this case, our slope is m and b is -5. We have y is equal to 0x minus 5. And once again, if 0 is the coefficient, 0 multiply anything will make it 0. So I can just say x is equal to -5. And what that gives us is a horizontal line. Example 4, m is equal to -1 and b is equal to -1/2. So we have y is equal to -1x minus half. But once again, if I have the 1 here, it's a bit redundant. So we're going to simplify the -1 just to -x minus half. All right, pause this video and try some of these on your own. All right, our next slide here, slope y-intercept form. Once again, let's remember that m represents the slope. The slope is the steepness of the line. And we use a ratio of the rise over the run to indicate the steepness of the line. What does B represent? B represents the point where it crosses the y-axis. So if we know both of those things, then we can get the equation of the line. Now this time, instead of me giving you the m and the b, you're going to find the m and the b based on the graph. Now finding the y-intercept is probably the most straightforward one. We have the point here. I know that 0 and -5 is our y-intercept. So I can write b is equal to -5. Next, let's find the slope. So to find the slope, I'm going to find 2 points on the line where I can count the squares. You want to choose something that is at a nice round corner. So counting my first one, I've gone up by 2 units, and then I'm going to the right by 3 units. That gives me a slope of rise of 2 over a run of 3. So our equation is going to be 2 over 3x minus 5. And we have the equation of this line. Let's do another 2 examples here. Right? First, we're going to find the y-intercept. This is crossing the y-axis at 0 and +3. So I know that the b is equal to 3. Let's find another point here. And I'm going to count the steps that it took for us to get there. So first, I went down 1, 2, 3, 4. I went down by 4, so -4 steps. And then I went to the right by 2. So our slope is -4 over 2. But -4 over 2 can be reduced. Let's divide it by 2 and we get -2. So the equation of our line, once we combine those two items, y is equal to -2x plus 3. Let's do one more example here. I'm going to find our our y-intercept. The y-intercept here, 0 and -1. We need to find another point on the graph. Could say there. And we're going to count the steps to get there. So I'm going to rise by 2. And then we're going to run by 4 to the right. Right, so our slope, we rose by 2, we ran by 4, and that simplifies to half. The b in this case is equal to -1, and the equation of the line, y is equal to half x minus 1. Right, pause the video. Oh, actually, no, we're not pausing the video yet. There are 2 special slopes, and we talked about these special slopes in the last video. Now, remember, if I have a horizontal line, we can find our our y-axis. The y-intercept, y or b is equal to -3. Now let's say I were to pick this as my second point. I can count the rise and the run. I've got 0 steps rising and I've run by 8. So our slope m is equal to 0 over 8. And if I simplify 0 divided by 8, we get m is equal to 0. So the equation of our line, y is equal to 0x minus 3. Now, because it's 0x, I don't have to write that, and I simply get y is equal to negative 3. Let's talk about the vertical line now. The vertical line has no y-intercept because it doesn't touch the y-axis at all. Now let's deal with a slope. Let's say I picked this point and this point. I have a rise, in this case, of negative 6. So my slope, m is equal to negative 6 over 0. Now remember when we talked about anything divided by 0? Your calculator will tell you that it's a math error or that it's undefined. And so in this case, there is no such thing as this as a slope. There is no y-intercept. The only thing is that we have all x values are going to be equal to 3. And so our equation, x is equal to 3. And I got the 3 because I know that this passes the x-axis at 3. And for every value of y, we're also going to have 3. Pause the video, try these 4 questions on your own.